Good morning. Thank you for joining us for We Are La Plata County. Today I'm here in the studio with the La Plata County Director of Emergency Management, Butch Knowlton. Butch, welcome. Thanks for being here. What are we here to talk about today?
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think we probably ought to talk a little bit about the 416 fire area again.
All right. Well, what's on your mind at this point, 1 year later?
Well, 1 year later, we're still obviously worried about the potential for flooding. And so not knowing exactly what's going to materialize with the monsoon season this year, our goal in emergency management is to work with the National Weather Service, work with the radar that's now available to us here, and try to predict as best we can the storms that might be generating and developing above the 416 area that might impact people at the bottom end of those drainages.
Great. And how is the storm season shaping up for the year?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you ask that. I started trying to predict what was going to take place with the 416 potential, the monsoon potential, about 3 or 4 months ago. And at that particular time, it seemed there was a pretty high probability that we would have a lot of moisture coming up. But here in the last month or so, a lot of the federal agencies have been trying to, if you will, dry up the monsoon a little bit. But even at that, we've lived in Colorado long enough that we all know that any moisture that we get that develops above some of the mountainous areas to the north of us can create isolated storms that can be very impactful for people that live at the bottom of some of the drainages. So we're going to continue to watch and do our best to predict and try to alert people to the conditions that may be developing, and hopefully we can get through the season.
What are some of the tools that you're using to monitor the storms and let people know what's going on?
The most important relationship that we actually have is with the National Weather Service out of Grand Junction. We developed that relationship back in 2002 during the Missionary Ridge fire. And so I've basically tried to do the same thing with the 416 fire area. And what we did is we asked the National Weather Service to develop a watch box for our area around the 416 area. So at any time that they see storms moving into or generating above the 416 area that can create heavy precipitation and heavy runoff, National Weather Service will call me night and day and let me know that these storms are starting to develop. Now that we also have the portable radar unit on Missionary Ridge that actually scans back and looks into the 416 area, that gives us a better ability to read the storms basically from the ground all the way up into the higher elevations of the storms. So it gives us a little better opportunity to predict and understand what those storms might generate.
Great. And if there is a storm that could generate potential flooding or debris flow, how can property owners learn about that and understand what their risk is?
Well, I think obviously property owners have got a little taste of flooding last year, so there's a lot of people that are already in tune with the fact that they may live in a high-risk area. La Plata County's gone back and worked with some of the other agencies to try to identify the most at-risk areas along the 416 perimeter. And of course, our greatest concern is the populations that could be affected by runoff. The greatest concern that we obviously have is the area called Tripp Creek, and that empties down into the County Road 203 area in the Hermosa area. And the reason we worry about Tripp is that its top end elevations is about 10,500 feet. It's a very concentrated canyon that delivers the water, storm water runoff down into a very populated area. And so we watch that very closely. There's some other areas in around the Tripp Creek area that impact the Fall Creek area, and in some cases the lower Hermosa drainage.
And have there been any debris flow or flooding events this year so far?
We have. Again, interesting enough, the National Weather Service contacted me day before yesterday, and they indicated they were seeing some storms that were starting to develop basically south of Purgatory along the ridgeline there. And those storms did continue to develop. They moved across the Hermosa drainage, and then they really bellowed out and very, very heavy rain developed in the head of Buck Creek, Dyke Canyon, and Trip Creek areas. And we did see some debris flows and heavy runoff for a very short period of time come down Trip Creek. And it did put some mud and rock into the historic Trip Creek drainage, impacted some driveways, and impacted the Animas Consolidated Ditch, and some lawns and a little bit of our county road. But it really wasn't anything bad as compared to last year.
So what should people do if a flooding or debris event occurs in their backyard or through their property?
You know, that's a difficult issue. Most importantly, be aware, because I think a lot of people just don't understand how wildfire changes the hydrology within a particular area. They don't understand that storm water process is totally different. And be aware of the fact that when we get heavy rains in that burn area, we're still going to get very heavy runoff. And I think that's just being conscious of the fact that conditions are different. And potentially when it rains really, really hard, we could see some very significant runoff down into the private properties and the roads and driveways down in the valley floor.
Are there any resources available for property owners and residents to prepare for these types of events?
Interesting enough, actually Congress created what's known as the Emergency Watershed Protection Act. And that was essentially created to assist property owners, typically after a federal fire. And in this particular case, the 416 was predominantly all federal lands. And so after the fire was put out, the Natural Resources Conservation Service stepped forward, and they helped administer the Emergency Watershed Protection Act and all of the benefits from that act. Those folks came in and they went back and did a lot of evaluation of some of the flood hazard areas, a lot of the impacts of some of the flood waters from last year. They developed some mitigation principles and needs for different properties within the affected areas. And we're in a process now of trying to get that program up and going.
Thank you, Butch. And for folks who would like to receive emergency notifications about flooding and potential debris flow events and any other emergency situation in the county, you can sign up for Code Red notifications via the county website at co.laplata.co.us. Thank you.